Good afternoon, I'm Sofia Nazarenko and you are watching Channel 24. U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witkoff is heading to Moscow immediately after concluding his visit to Israel. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin says Russia is ready to wait if Kyiv refuses to negotiate and repeats his offer to end the war, but only on the Kremlin's condition. So we are witnessing a new diplomatic push or just another smokescreen from Moscow? And how is Europe reading these signals? To unpack it all, I'm joined by Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of the Brussels Freedom Hub. Good afternoon, Roland, and thank you for being with us.
Hi, Sophia.
U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Moscow soon. Not long ago, Donald Trump himself voiced doubts about the value of talks with Putin, since despite the conversations, the Russian president keeps bombing civilian areas in Ukraine. What do you think Witkoff's real mission in Moscow is? And is there any reasons to believe his visit will actually change anything on the ground, especially after recent statements by Vladimir Putin?
Well, when it comes to Ukraine, I don't have the impression that just talking is going to change anything. Also, Trump's threats over the past couple of weeks have not changed the Kremlin's attitude, quite the contrary. But honestly, I doubt whether Ukraine is the only or even the top issue that Witkoff is discussing in Moscow. I have the impression that it may have a lot more to do with the Middle East, with finding some kind of solution for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, than with Ukraine. But that's my personal speculation here.
Talking about Ukraine, after yet another massive Russian missile strike on Kyiv, President Trump confirmed his intention to impose new sanctions on Russia. However, he also admitted he is not sure if these sanctions actually will bother Putin. And from your perspective, will the Kremlin really feel the heat this time?
Well, that really depends on what kind of sanctions are going to be enacted. And if we look at the situation, I mean, this is like an equation with many unknowns. The biggest unknown is, well, what exactly will be the sanctions? Trump has so far given only indications. He's made threats, but he's made threats on many other things before, and then he didn't actually come to action. In other cases, like bombing Iran, for example, yes, he did actually, his actions were a lot worse than his threats before. So, we don't know what's going to happen. But a big unknown, if indeed Trump imposes these secondary sanctions with possibly 100% tariffs on goods from countries that still trade with Russia, particularly buy energy, especially oil from Russia. So that's the big question. The country that buys 80% of Russian oil is China. Now, of course, U.S. secondary sanctions against China would be incredibly painful for China. They would also be, by the way, incredibly painful for U.S. consumers. But the trick here, the snag, if you want, for Trump is that the U.S. are at the moment in very, very delicate trade negotiations with China. And we have seen in other cases, for example, on Taiwan policy, how Trump has actually gone soft in recent weeks vis-a-vis the Chinese government, because he doesn't want to rock the boat, as the saying goes. He doesn't want to disturb the possible deal that may be on the cards with China. And that makes me doubt whether he really will seriously impose 100% tariffs on China because they buy 80% of Russian export oil. So, it's anybody's guess. But, in the end, we do not know what Trump is going to do.
Interestingly, Donald Trump himself admits these sanctions might not really impact Russia. And as we've seen, even his ultimatum to Putin to end the war hasn't changed much. Russia keeps cynically targeting civilians in Ukraine. Just recently, a missile strike on Kyiv killed 31 people and injured 159. If sanctions and ultimatums haven't worked, what will? And is it time for Washington to rethink its entire pressure strategy?
Well, to start with the last question, I think Washington has been developing in a healthy direction, at least rhetorically. It also has, for the first time since the inauguration of the new administration, actually announced new deliveries of U.S. weapons to Ukraine, financed by Europeans. But that's a positive step forward. So I would say that not a rethink, but a continuation of the direction which U.S. policy has already taken in the past couple of months vis-a-vis Russia. And to come to your first question, what will work? Well, only a combination of things. And here two things stand out. And these are both economic sanctions that really bite. And of course, also stepping up military assistance to Ukraine. And both things combined, I think, may very well still change the picture, but a guarantee there is not.
You already touched this topic. Yesterday, Trump announced new tariffs on several countries, including India, partly due to their purchases of Russian weapons and energy. Why leave Russia and China off that list, especially Russia? And could tariffs on India still end up hurting Moscow's interest?
Well, again, starting with the last question, yes. Actually, India might stop buying Russian oil. If the US makes it very expensive for India to do so by raising tariffs. And, of course, tariffs against India would also hurt US consumers, would hurt the US, might completely alienate India. But frankly speaking, at the moment, India seems to be interested in a deal with the US. And we have seen at the example with the European Union that even though others may hold some cards, the White House, Trump, is so ready to bully others and so ready to take aggressive steps that they sometimes give in. And this may be the case with India as well. But as I said before, only 20% or less than 20% of Russian oil exports actually go to India. So, we're not talking about something that would strategically hurt Russia. Now, why is Russia not even on the list of countries threatened? Well, Russian exports to the US are minimal. The entire trade volume between Russia and the United States has decreased by 90% since 2022, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And it is today at between 3 and 4 billion US dollars. That is honestly peanuts. Now, so even 100% tariff against Russian exports to the US would really not hurt the Kremlin. Now, last point, China. I think I've already explained that. China is right at the moment not explicitly threatened by the White House, simply because China and the US are in sensitive negotiations, and I don't think that Trump wants to rock the boat. So, if we in the end are stuck with just India and maybe Turkey to some extent feeling some consequences, that is unlikely to, in itself, change the Kremlin's policy towards Ukraine.
According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump's sudden shift against Russia has sparked skepticism not only within his administration, but also across Europe. Many say that since his return to office, he hasn't done enough to pressure the Kremlin to end the war. So how are officials in Brussels reacting to this change? Maybe you have some insights.
They certainly welcome the direction which this change is taking, that the bromance between Putin and Trump, which has lasted much too long, is over now. So there is some hope, but there's also some skepticism to what extent Trump will really seek a full head-on confrontation with Putin. I mean, Trump himself has pointed out on numerous occasions that he wants to avoid World War III. He's accused Zelensky of playing with World War III. All this is giving Putin plenty of hints how he could still scare Trump. And I wouldn't exclude that the Kremlin actually escalates rhetoric vis-a-vis Trump. And then, Trump may very well fall back on this line that he's already indicated in the last couple of days. Well, maybe the Kremlin just won't change. And that may still mean that Trump will largely try to get out of the whole game about Ukraine's future and leave it to the Europeans. So we don't know what is really going on in Trump's brain and how consistent his change of policy towards Putin will be.
What should Ukraine make of this change in the U.S. tone? Is it a chance to push forward, or should they be cautious?
No, Ukraine should certainly continue to cooperate with Western countries, and that is Europe and the United States. We've just seen over the last couple of days how angry phone calls from Brussels and other places in Europe to Kyiv about a proposed weakening of the independence of anti-corruption institutions in Ukraine can actually have an impact on Kyiv's policy. And, there's been a 180-degree turn. So, sticking to implementing the rule of law and strengthening the rule of law is one thing that Ukraine should do vis-a-vis the European Union. And when it comes to the United States, I mean, certainly the more conciliatory line vis-a-vis the United States of the last couple of months so far has paid off, and Ukraine certainly should not give in, not signal any strategic concession in terms of defending its freedom. But of course, it should always signal that it's ready to talk and that it's ready for a ceasefire. The Ukrainian readiness for a ceasefire and the Russian de facto refusal of a ceasefire are, I think, very, very important, if not the most important factors in Trump's change of opinion on Putin. So I can only say just continue on that road, Ukraine, and you will have some chance to actually change things for the better.
The U.S. Senate Appropriation Committee has strongly backed a bill allocating $1 billion in military aid to Ukraine for the 2026 fiscal year. At the same time, Senators Jean Shaheen and Lisa Murkowski have introduced a bipartisan support in Ukrainian Act, which envisions a multi-billion-dollar assistance over the coming years. Does this signal that Washington isn't just monitoring the situation, but is preparing for long-term commitment to Ukraine?
I certainly hope so. But we all know that these bipartisan bills in Congress will only fly if Trump gives his green light to the Republicans. That has been the case, for example, with the Lindsey Graham bill of slapping 500% tariffs on countries that still deal with Russia. But that has been explicitly rejected by the White House, by Trump. So, and as long as he doesn't explicitly give his green light to the Republicans, they will not vote in favor. And the same may be true for this bill with 1 billion military assistance to Ukraine. And by the way, 1 billion is not such a huge deal. In the past, we've been talking about tens of billions in U.S. assistance to Ukraine and in European deliveries to Ukraine, by the way. So, I wouldn't give too much importance to this one particular initiative, but it may actually become a sign in the good direction.
Thank you very much, Roland, for your insights. We'll keep following how this new U.S. approach develops and what it will mean for Ukraine. And stay with us and subscribe to know more.